Wuthering Waves 2.0 is finally here, and the first character to come with 2.0 is the 5-star Glacio main DPS, Carlotta. I've gotten more used to her playstyle and what she brings to the table in terms of solo and team value. So I want to go over her kit, how she can be played, talk about her sequences, her signature weapon and her teams, and finally my thoughts on her, including the positives and negatives, and if I think she's worth pulling for. So let's start with her kit. Carlotta's basic attack combo is technically only a 2-part combo, with the second part generating 3 moldable crystals. When doing this 2-part combo, she will attack with her pistols. When Carlotta has moldable crystals, her basic attack combo will change from a 2-part pistol combo to a 3-part rifle combo. Each part of the rifle combo will consume 1 moldable crystal, and when a moldable crystal is consumed, it will generate 1/12 of her forte gauge. This attack combo will both consume moldable crystals and generate forte even while outside of combat or missing an attack. Her pistol and rifle combos will chain into each other very easily with little to no stuttering. Before moving on, let's quickly go over some important details about moldable crystals. The amount of moldable crystals Carlotta has are displayed on the left side of her character and also in the buff window above her forte gauge. The stack of moldable crystals will last for 10 seconds, and the duration of the entire stack will be reset when additional moldable crystals are generated. Her heavy attack will consume a small amount of stamina while doing a pistol attack with a short reposition in the direction the player is trying to move in and generating 3 moldable crystals. If the player isn't trying to move in a direction, Carlotta will reposition either forwards or towards the current target and can even move behind the target if she's close enough. Her heavy attack will quickly chain into her rifle attack combo. Her mid-air attack is different from other gun-wielding characters and will perform a plunging attack, slamming down towards the target's location with a small AoE hitting around Carlotta on impact. Upon landing, this attack can be followed up with a basic attack where she'll perform a kick before repositioning backwards or away from the target and finally shooting them with her pistol. This follow-up attack will generate 3 moldable crystals and quickly chains into her rifle attack combo. Carlotta's dodge counter will perform a short-range shotgun shot followed by a longer-ranged rifle shot. This attack will always generate forte by consuming a moldable crystal because when Carlotta dodges an attack, the dodge itself will generate 3 moldable crystals, making it so that she always has moldable crystals for her counter attack. This attack will replace the first attack in her 3-part rifle combo. Carlotta's skill has 2 parts. The first part, or her basic skill, will perform a backwards reposition while shooting the target and generating 3 moldable crystals. This will also inflict the target and some enemies in close proximity with dispersion, which will immobilize them in their current position for 1.5 seconds. This skill has a cooldown of 14 seconds. After the basic skill is used, an enhanced skill will become available for 7 seconds. This second skill will put Carlotta into the air at the target's location and will perform a badass burst attack with 2 rifles. This attack will leave her suspended in the air and consume all moldable crystals to build forte. Her forte ability will replace her heavy attack with 1 of 2 attacks. When Carlotta possesses full forte and a tinted crystal represented by the red crystal in the middle of her forte bar, her heavy attack is replaced with imminent oblivion, which will freeze time, moving Carlotta to the target's location and perform an AoE burst attack. This attack is considered as resonant skill damage and has a 22-second cooldown as it will consume her forte and tinted crystal, with the tinted crystal naturally regenerating after 22 seconds. Her hair will also crystallize when she has a tinted crystal, but only when she has full forte. When Carlotta has full forte but the tinted crystal is on cooldown, this will replace her heavy attack with containment tactics, which is identical to her normal heavy attack but deals slightly more damage. This attack is considered as basic attack damage. Both forte abilities will reduce her skill cooldown by 6 seconds. Her liberation ability will do an AoE shot in front of her, dealing a large amount of damage while afflicting the enemies with deconstruction and putting Carlotta into the Twilight Tango or liberation state. Dealing damage against enemies affected with deconstruction will have the damage ignore 18% of their defense, and the deconstruction debuff itself will last for 4 seconds. While in her liberation state, Carlotta's Liberation and basic attacks are replaced with Death Knell, which has 4 charges. Using Death Knell will have Carlotta reposition in a direction the player is trying to move in, or either towards or away from the target depending on how many shots have been fired. She will shoot the target with her rifle, followed by 4 additional shots from 4 other rifles surrounding Carlotta. Each shot will shoot in a line towards the target, hitting any enemies in the way, and no matter if it hits a target or not, it will generate 1 meta vector for her Liberation Forte gauge. Once all 4 charges of Death Knell are used, her Liberation and basic attacks will be replaced with Fatal Finale, which will start a short animation before shooting a high damage shot, hitting all enemies in a line in front of Carlotta. The Twilight Tango state will end either after casting Fatal Finale or after 10 seconds have expired. Something important to mention about her Liberation: if you get her Forte to full before casting her Liberation, Carlotta will receive a buff called Final Bow. This buff can be seen above her Forte gauge. While Carlotta has this buff, all damage caused by her Liberation attacks will have their multiplier increased by 80%. This buff will be consumed after the Liberation's final hit, Fatal Finale, but will also naturally expire if the final hit is not triggered. The buff will remain even if you consume Carlotta's Forte, so not only should you use her Forte attack before casting her Liberation, the Liberation state will reset her normal Forte gauge anyway. Her Liberation is considered as resonant skill damage, can be cast mid-air, and has a 25-second cooldown. Her intro skill will start her on the ground, where she will attack the target with an exploding crystal. This will generate 3 multiple crystals and also generates a quarter of her Forte gauge. Carlotta's outro skill will deal a single large amount of damage to the target and enemies around it. Her first inherent skill will make her immune to damage and interruptions while performing mid-air attacks after casting her second skill, Chromatic Splendor. This immunity will last until the mid-air attack deals damage. This inherent skill also has the passive of reducing the active character's flight stamina by 20% while Carlotta is on the team. Her second inherent skill allows her intro skill, second resonance skill, Liberation's Death Knell attacks, and her heavy attack Imminent Oblivion to inflict deconstruction on any enemies hit. That's her kit. So let's talk about some ways that she can be used. Despite being a gun-wielding character, all of her attacks can parry, and because she can attack at range, you can parry some attacks in the air well before they would be a threat to you. Her inherent skill giving immunity to damage and interruption for her mid-air attacks may only last until she deals damage, but it allows her to feel very safe after using her second skill, even though it leaves you mid-air. However, if you delay using her second skill until the enemy is unfrozen, the airtime can be used to reposition into the air or behind the enemy, making it great at avoiding attacks on its own. This second skill also acts as an incredibly good gap closer and can be used on enemies over some pretty long distances. Her plunge attack is also a very good gap closer, and as Carlotta has 2 ways to get airborne, this can be very helpful in some scenarios. Her enhanced heavy attack actually gives her iframes and can be used to dodge attacks in a similar way to Dan Jin. So this can be used to protect yourself through attacks if your timing is good. This attack also moves you towards the target's location, allowing it to be used as a gap closer. One other thing to mention with her heavy attack, unlike most characters in the game, her heavy attack will not start with her basic attack if you try to perform a heavy attack at the start of the combo. This makes it a lot easier to perform the move that you're trying to when attacking, with the slight drawback of theoretically lower damage. But this is really only relevant in the overworld when initiating fights, so losing a very small amount of damage is not a big deal. The reposition in her Liberation state can be used to move around a boss and completely avoid some attacks in the game, giving her the ability to determine not only where the fight takes place, but also some control over whether you even need to dodge attacks. It's not too hard to find elevated areas to use the new glider, but if you're struggling to get enough distance from the ground, her skill launching you into the air can give you that boost pretty easily. Couple that with the reduced flight stamina consumption, and she feels like she was made to explore Rinascita. The parry on her skill is really responsive and can parry attacks very easily. However, even if you're someone who struggles with timing parries, because her first skill also immobilizes the enemy for a short period of time, as long as you don't parry too late, the follow-up second skill is also very good at parrying on its own, so when you work them together, both of her skills make parrying with her feel very easy. When using her two skills to generate Forte, her first skill generating 3 multiple crystals means all you need to do is either use a heavy attack, plunge attack, or 2 basics, or you can dodge an attack from an enemy to get all 6 stacks. This not only gives her a lot of flexibility when getting full stacks, but because her heavy attack can be cancelled with both of her skills, she has 2 very fast combos to quickly build max stacks and fill half her Forte bar very quickly. So let's quickly talk about her signature weapon and sequences and if they're worth pulling for. Her signature weapon only gives 500 base attack, which is a fair amount lower than Static Mist. However, it makes up for it by giving a massive 72% crit damage, making it a great crit stat stick for any gun wielding character. The passive at rank 1 gives 12% attack boost and also gives 48% skill damage bonus for 5 seconds when the wielder uses an intro skill or their liberation. Her S1 gives her 12.5% crit rate when attacking enemies affected by deconstruction. It also provides an extra 30 Forte when her second skill hits enemies that were immobilized by her first skill, allowing for easier rotations. Her S2 increases the damage multiplier for the final hit of her liberation by 126%, which is already her hardest hitting ability and will more than double its damage. This is a really great sequence if you care about nuking. Her S3 gives her outro a second massive tick of damage and increases the damage multiplier of her 2 resonance skills by 93%. This increases her damage by a fair bit, as her skills can not only hit pretty hard, but can also be used twice each per rotation. This sequence could also enable a Lingering Tunes meme build with high outro skill damage. Her S4 is a great team-wide buff, giving 25% skill damage bonus for 30 seconds whenever Carlotta casts any of her heavy attacks. Her S5 increases the damage multiplier of her enhanced heavy attack by 47%. And lastly, her S6 increases the damage of Death Knell and will shoot double the amount of follow-up shots from the floating guns, which gives a total damage multiplier increase of 186.6% for each Death Knell shot. It will also make it so that enemies hit by Death Knell are immobilized for 1.5 seconds or until they receive damage. So this immobilize could be interrupted by a coordinated attack from a character like Zhezhe. So should you pull for a weapon or extra copies for sequences? For free-to-play players, the standard banner weapon Static Mist is more than enough for her, and her sequences are good, but she functions just fine without them. But if you have enough currency and you really like Carlotta's playstyle, her weapon is a massive bonus to her damage, especially in a full team, with her S1 being a big benefit if you already have her signature weapon. So I would recommend her weapon over her sequences, as it's not only a big increase in damage, but it's also now Chisha's best in slot weapon as well, so Chisha players should definitely think about picking this up, even if they don't have Carlotta. For light spenders, getting her weapon and either her S2 or S3 is a great stopping point. However, for Wales, she's not only the first limited Glacio main DPS in the game, but she's the first 5-star gun user as well, so getting her to S6 could be a great investment for the future. However, overall, I would recommend pulling for Static Mist if you would rather have more characters over having stronger characters, because it's not only a good weapon for main DPSs, but it's a great weapon for any sub DPS characters like Mortifi or Alto, so it's definitely worth using your standard currency on. Now, before we talk about how to play her, let's talk about her Echo and Echo sets. The new Echo set, Frosty Resolve, was basically tailor-made for her, with the set bonus and the current 4 cost giving her everything she needs to do more damage. The set gives skill damage bonus on the 2-piece, and the 5-piece grants 22.5% glacio damage bonus for 15 seconds after using her skill, and 18% skill damage bonus for 5 seconds after casting Liberation. Now, this does say that it stacks up to 2 times, and in the description this part is a whole sentence, seconds. However, with a bit of experimenting and common sense, the stacking effect only applies to the 5-second skill damage bonus and not the 15-second glacio damage bonus. It's definitely not the most confusing description we've seen from Kuro, and it's pretty easy to figure out that the stacking only applies to the second part, but just in case people thought otherwise, I thought it was worth mentioning. The only current 4-cost echo for this set is the Sentry Construct, which gives 12% skill and glacio damage bonus to the Resonator for just having it equipped in the main slot. This echo has 2 abilities. First, it will launch into the air and perform a blade sweep, striking all enemies in a small area in front of it. The second ability requires the equipped Resonator to have used their liberation 5 times and will change the echo skill into an enhanced version, but it will launch into the air doing a drill attack and slam into the ground, dealing damage in a large AoE while freezing any targets hit by the attack for about a second or 2. Both echo skills can be cast mid-air and deal the same amount of damage, which is a bit of a weird choice on Kuro's part, as the longer cast time for a short freeze and AoE isn't really worth it in a solo scenario and feels like it was designed to be swap cancelled. Having said that, this is her current best in slot echo on this set, and there isn't currently any summon 3-cost echoes, so it's best to stick with this echo for the glacio and skill damage bonus. However, I will give an honorable mention to this 3-cost echo, as it gives 12% glacio damage bonus for having the echo in the main slot, and also deals glacio damage to match Carlotta. As for other sets, you can run her on Freezing Frost. It is a good alternative, however, depending on how you play her, it could be harder to maintain uptime on the 5-piece bonus, as it requires you to perform heavy attacks or basic attacks to get the 3 stacks. However, if you have a good Freezing Frost set, this is a really good option for the short term until you can build a full Frosty Resolve set. The 2 best echoes on this set are Lampy for the glacio and skill damage bonus, or Lumiscale Construct for the parry and special skill counter ability and higher than average damage. Lastly, you can build her on Lingering Tunes, but the damage type for the 4-cost Mech Abomination is Electro, so not only will you lose out on some damage, but it's very unlikely that anyone has a glacio main stat Lingering Tunes set built, so I wouldn't recommend building this for her, even if you can't farm for Frosty Resolve for whatever reason. Freezing Frost will be a much better set for team play and will likely have more value on your account once it's replaced by Frosty Resolve in future. As for the stats of your echoes, if you have her signature weapon, crit rate main stat 4-cost is a must. If you have static mist, then crit damage is better. As for other weapons that don't have a crit substat, either crit rate or crit damage depending on your ratio. For her 3 costs, 2 glacio main stats will give you the most amount of damage according to my calculations. However, there isn't a great deal of difference between 2 glacio and 1 glacio 1 attack percent. So I would just take what I can get, but ideally you would want 2 glacio main stats. The 1 costs are pretty easy, always run 2 attack percent main stats. For her substats, try to get her energy regen to roughly 115% or higher, then get crit rate and damage, then either attack percent or skill damage bonus, with attack percent seeming to have better scaling if you have her signature weapon, and skill damage bonus if you don't. However, this is a bit of a muchness, so typically whatever echo has higher substats is better. Lastly, you can also try to get flat attack if you're aiming for the perfect pieces. So now let's move on and talk about some things to consider when using her in a team. As your main DPS, you should always try to start a fight with Carlotta. You can use her skill, heavy attack, and then second skill to generate half of her forte very quickly, and then you can either swap cancel her second skill or use her echo skill mid-air and swap cancel that instead. Then after you do your healer and sub DPS rotations, swap back to Carlotta with an intro skill and use her skill, second skill, and then plunge attack. You should have full forte at this point and full energy depending on your energy recharge, so you want to use her enhanced heavy attack followed by her liberation and full liberation combo, after which you can again use her skill, heavy attack, second skill, then swap cancel her echo skill and repeat the rotation. This is a more ideal combo for damage than trying to use her basic attacks to fill up the rest of her forte. Because most of her damage scales off skill damage, especially if you have her weapon, her basic attacks, normal heavy attacks, plunge attack, and dodge counter are considered as basic attack damage, so having these in your rotation will lower her damage output compared to using skill damage scaling abilities. However, it will still work if you don't use 4 skills per rotation, just not as well. In terms of quick swap teams, you'd be better off listening to someone else, as I don't play quick swap, so I haven't looked into all the different ways to use her in that playstyle. However, for her teammates, in order from best to worst, her best teammates currently are either Zhezhe, Lumi, or Tao Chi as the buffer, and either Shorekeeper, Verena, or Baizha as the healer. If you have Stellar Symphony or S6 Baizha is better than Verena and a lot easier to use. If you don't have a good buffer, you can always use a character with quick concerto building like Senhua, Yang Yang, or even Mortifi with Static Mist, but you will notice your damage is nowhere near as high. So let's go over her positives. Her kit has a lot of ways to avoid damage, giving players who want to style on bosses a lot of options for how they want to deal with the enemy's attacks. Her repositioning abilities can get you into bad positions, but if you pay attention to the boss and the field during fights, the reposition can allow for really good damage uptime while avoiding attacks and remaining safe. I haven't fought it much yet, but it feels like Carlotta will excel in fights like the Inferno Rider hologram if you can just keep an eye on your positioning. She isn't a hard character to get used to, but she also has enough depth that people who are looking to get the most out of their characters will be able to find a lot of ways to use her kit to their advantage. When fighting a single enemy, she can shred through their health very quickly and can do so from a distance. This makes her great at fighting bosses and allows her to continue to punish bosses that tend to move away from the player, fly up into the air, or just decide to be hard to hit in general. Being a ranged character that can parry feels too strong for the current content in the game, as it can make a lot of hard parries feel a lot easier to deal with. Getting immunity to damage and interruption during mid-air attacks makes using her second skill feel very safe. It'd be nice if it lasted for the full animation and not until the attack deals damage, but it's very good at making her skill feel very safe to use. The timing on her enhanced heavy attacks iframes is tight, but it feels very good to pull off, making her playstyle feel very rewarding to players willing to experiment with her. Whenever I swap Carlotta off my team when exploring Renacida, I do notice the difference she makes to gliding stamina drain. She isn't necessary, but she definitely makes exploration faster and more enjoyable. And now let's talk about some of her negatives. Certain attacks have a soft animation lock, like the third part of her rifle combo. It won't stop you from dash cancelling, but the animation takes a long time to cast and makes it feel like you're waiting ages to use her heavy attack. It'd be nice if you could animation cancel directly into her heavy attack to speed up rotations and even take better advantage of the iframes you get from her enhanced heavy attack. The Frosty Resolve set being niche to her kit and playstyle makes farming her echoes more of a drain on your account's resources, as they can't be shared with any other characters right now. This could change in future, but for now, farming and leveling her echoes means putting all of your experience and tuners into echoes that are only going to go onto one character. Her dodge counter attack not only doesn't scale off skill damage, but she will also perform the same dodge counter during her liberation state, wasting valuable time and damage buffs while trying to get her death knell shots off. This is honestly really disappointing, as she could have had an enhanced death knell shot as a dodge counter to reward dodging during her liberation. This would have made her kinda similar to the A-rank character Wanshi from PGR, which would have made her so fun to play in my opinion. So this is a missed opportunity. Somewhat following on from that, death knell shots can be cancelled by a dodge, which can waste large amounts of damage for the sake of not getting hit. Most people don't seem to care about this because they'll just use a healer to heal back chip damage, so they would rather just take the hit. But as someone who likes to try and no-hit content in the game, this does actually get on my nerves a bit when her liberation not only takes a while to get the shots off, but also punishes you if the boss does a fast enough attack to hit you before the shot. I would honestly like to see some kind of solution to this personally, but as it's not a big issue, I highly doubt any change like a Wanshi counter shot will get implemented in future. The camera for both her liberation and her echo skill is really bad, with the liberation especially for enemies that move into the air, like Heron, Aches, or Fallacy. She lacks good AoE damage, making her very susceptible to power creep by an AoE Glacio main or even sub DPS character in future. And I also imagine she's going to feel feel kinda shit to play in wave-based content. Her basic attacks don't scale off her skill damage, which isn't a big deal, but it makes not only her echo set, but her main echo's damage boost feel like it doesn't provide as much as what it does for the rest of her kit. This is a lot more noticeable solo, as you spend a fair amount of time doing basic attacks and dodge countering, which can feel very weak in relation to her skills, enhanced heavy attack, and liberation attacks. Overall though, Carlotta is a great single target main DPS with great movement, firepower, and exploration capabilities. But is she worth pulling for? It depends. Even though I don't have Zhezhe or Lumi, her playstyle was enough for me to pull for her, but if you're someone who already has Jinxie, Changliao, Camellia, you might not need a character with massive single target damage and would be better off waiting for a character with better AoE damage and more universally useful in more areas of the game. However, if you want to shred through Tower of Adversity boss floors as fast as possible, and you already have Zhezhe, Carlotta feels like a must pull. Her single target damage potential is very high, and with how fast she can burst through her rotation, she will shred through boss floors without much trouble. She's also really great at fighting the more annoying flying bosses, so if you really don't like the enemies flying away from you and going out of reach of your melee characters, she might be worth picking up just for that. So if you were to ask me, she isn't a must pull and she's susceptible to power creep in future, but right now, Carlotta with Static Mist, Zhezhe, and Baizha is all you currently need to absolutely destroy Tower of Adversity or boss fights that are either weak to or don't resist glacio damage, making her a great character to pull for if you're trying to push further into Tower of Adversity or you just like her playstyle. However, if you're a Tao Chi enjoyer, I would highly recommend Carlotta. Tao Chi isn't the best buffer for her, but she still gives skill damage amplify, and even though Carlotta has great repositioning and movement, Tao Chi will do a great job at protecting her from what damage she does take. So for Tao Chi enjoyers, I do think that she'll work well with your playstyle. But that will do it for the video. I'm sure I didn't cover everything to do with her and will likely discover more use cases over time, but I hope you're able to get something useful from it, and I hope you're able to enjoy the video. If you did enjoy the video, you can leave a like or a comment, and if you'd like to see more content in future, you can subscribe to the channel. For anyone who might be curious about why I haven't uploaded for a while, the old SSD in my computer kind of shit the bed and put it into a constant blue screen boot loop or just displayed a black screen. But because it was also close to Christmas, even though I took the SSD in to hopefully get some of the data off it, the repair shop ended up going on Christmas break, and long story short, I only got the new SSD a few days ago. A lot of the old info that was on the drive ended up being fine, but a lot of the newer recordings, including the Yinlin review and the returning to Genshin videos I'd planned to make, unfortunately got corrupted. A couple of the videos seem to have survived and I still have to sort through them. However, I can easily remake the Yinlin video, but the Genshin video might be dead in the water. However, over the Christmas break, I got to think about some videos I'd like to start making after this. With the next video that I'm planning being soloing the new holograms, I already planned to beat Fallacy with Carlotta and was thinking about using Chisha against the Sentry. After that though, I've thought about doing the same style of video to this one for all of the characters that I've built, including 4-star characters. So if you would like to see videos like that, you can let me know down in the comments. Also, one more thing to let everyone know, I am planning to build a NAS for my house to back up all of my data, so hopefully if this sort of thing happens again in future, it will be a lot easier and faster to deal with. But that pretty much sums up what's going on, so that'll do it from me, and I hope to see you guys in the next video, and I'll catch you later.